New York Republican Congresswoman on the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Pandemic, Nicole Malliotakis. Galopasca to you, and thank you very much for joining me tonight.
It's great to be with you. Thank you.
So let's discuss what you saw today that was either surprising or something that sent shivers down your spine.
Well, really, I think what happened today was a confirmation of what Republicans have been saying all along, and really what Dr. Redfield, the former CDC director, told us in the last hearing, that this was indeed something that came from the lab, and it not just from the Wuhan lab, but was also potentially funded with American tax dollars. One of the things I think was really shocking, both at that hearing and this hearing, was to hear that it was not just national NIH money that had gone to the Wuhan lab, but also they talked about Department of State funds, U.S. aid funds, Department of Defense funds also going to the Wuhan lab. And so I think we need to get to the bottom as to why so much of American tax dollars were being funneled to that lab and what was the purpose. Because as your report mentioned, there was a Chinese military operations taking place at that lab. The U.S. intelligence shows that since at least 2017. So we need to know why American tax dollars were there. I think the other important thing is if we want to prevent this pandemic in the future, we need to ensure that we know where it came from and what kind of subpar, unsafe conditions were at that lab that allowed for it to be leaked. Those are the questions that obviously anyone would want to know if you're trying to prevent a future pandemic, but it took 2 years for us to actually get to this point where we're having hearings because the Democrats refused to do it. They had hearings on all sorts of stuff except for actually what caused this thing.
That I don't understand. I will never understand that. And that is such a miscarriage of the legislative branch. The fact that they would let this turn into a cold case and we're only picking it up so many years later when that should have been the greatest point of urgency for anyone in Congress. Because guess what? Democrats died too. Democrats lost family members. They don't want to go through this whole thing again. Nobody does. But they're acting like it is solely a political issue, like somehow ignoring the origins of COVID is a facial disgracial to the former president. It is so much bigger than that. You know, whatever Anthony Fauci was doing, whatever he knew about, whatever researchers were withholding the information that was screaming at them through their data, they should all be held accountable, and we should all have so many more answers than we have now. So my question in terms of prevention, in terms of what you do, where do we go from here?
Well, shortly after our first hearing, I think one of the most important steps took place, and that was we passed legislation unanimously from the House and the Senate to disclose all the COVID intelligence related to the Wuhan lab. President Biden was pushed in a corner where he had to sign this legislation, so we're expecting for that information to be declassified, and I think that's going to give us a lot more information to try to put the pieces together of this puzzle. But I think you're right. I think that Dr. Fauci did know that it was created in a lab. He didn't want the public to know, and why, I don't know. But I think the evidence really leads to the fact that there was a monetary relationship between NIH, which he runs, and the Wuhan lab through the EcoHealth Alliance. So I'm very hopeful that we will bring in, if not subpoena, the EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak, because I think he has a lot of answers to the questions. And he was one of the leaders, by the way, in pushing that this was a natural occurring here or origin, that it did not come from the lab. So why was Dr. Fauci and Peter Daszak working together to suppress the lab leak theory the entire time? And even Dr. Fauci went before the Senate committee and told Rand Paul under oath that they didn't have any information regarding a monetary relationship. They were not funding, he said, gain-of-function research at Wuhan lab, and yet he was told in an email, we know now, in January of that year, that yes, indeed, they had a monetary relationship. So there's a lot of questions here, and we got to get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely right. And, you know, one of those questions is, when will Anthony Fauci be charged with perjury? All right, Congresswoman Malliotakis, thank you so much.
Thank you.